For anyone that's tuned in, thanks for doing so. This is another episode of Preparing the Unprepared. I'm going to be actually speaking today with Krylo Progobenko. He's the head of data science at Hearts and Science, formerly known as KIP, just to keep things simple. Some of you may know me. My name is Lewis Adams Dunstan. I'm an experienced recruiter that's worked across many different technical verticals globally throughout my career. But for the last 4 years, I've been supporting people that are trying to make smarter career and hiring decisions within the world of data. So the aim of these discussions is to identify things, hopefully within the data space, that we believe are either not getting enough exposure or perhaps are areas that we think people have the least understanding of, but are still so important when making those decisions. So today's topic is actually going to be about a hiring manager's insights into resume screening. So today, Kip's going to be joining me. He's been on both sides of the fence. I've worked with him as a data scientist and a candidate, and also as a hiring manager. So I thought Kip would be very well positioned, just based on our relationship, to tell us about his journey and also to try and help you guys understand what it is a hiring manager is looking for when you're actually putting your resume forward. So welcome to the show, Kip.
Thank you, Lewis, for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, and hi to all the audience on the LinkedIn.
So hopefully, Kip, you could give us kind of like a brief intro into your background, because it's not necessarily the most conventional route to becoming a data science manager, not having come from a PhD background yourself.
Well, happy to explain how all this happened, and I think I truly believe it happened by pure accident. At that time, I was with a company called IPsoft. It's a very well-known AI developer in the space, and I think they are one of the pioneers to actually commercialize AI chatbots. Prior to that line of business, they were doing a lot of automations as a managed service provider, and I was a part of automation team, and I was an automation engineer with a focus on network engineering. So pretty much my duty was to automate all possible problems that can happen in the network environment. It happens that at the same time, I was at the final year at the Baruch College, graduating with a degree in statistics, and I was eager to apply the knowledge that I received in college beyond the labs and like curated examples and use cases. So on my own, I started exploring the database, the production database of the company, in order to identify, how can I create a reporting system better than it existed before. And I've done a couple of iterations, created a couple of spreadsheets and started sending them out. So luckily, customer success team got an eye on one of the reports, and they reported back to the higher management of the company. That's how I got noticed. I had a chat with VP of operations, and he asked me if I want to run a small team of business analysts for the automation team. That's how it all began. So I hired 2 more people on my team. One was Connie Chen. She had a Master of Statistics from Columbia, and there was a guy, I forgot the name. Pardon me in advance. I forgot the name, and he was a really talented data engineer guy based in Austin. And then from there, we built a small dashboard with data pipelining on the back end. And I started applying a very primitive, I would not say primitive, maybe rudimentary forecasting techniques like REMA in order to identify what potentially can happen in XYZ customer environments. And from there, the responsibilities have expanded, and there was an urgent need for NLP project. And at that time, IBM was about to proxy a couple of clients to us, and they want to see the capabilities, not in terms of data science or machine learning or forecasting, but in terms of how quickly we can automate those environments for those clients. And then the job needed to be done, I believe, in 2 weeks. So I took a stab, requested logs from monitoring systems, and each log has a description field of the alert. For example, if it was a network device, like the network interface is down, or maybe CPU utilization, or maybe hard drive is full in some of the service. So we applied a very basic NLP, and we were able to match whatever was happening in our system on the left-hand side, and then whatever was happening in those prospective client systems on the right-hand side. And I was able to produce timelines, plan of action, like reports on what can be automated, what cannot be automated, and if something we were able to automate, how much time it was going to take us. And then that project took off. We built a pretty robust system of dashboard using our Cassandra system on the back end, and then the Shiny dashboard framework, just to quickly bring up everything live, up and running. And then at that time, they were spinning a AI chatbot product, and I was invited on the team. We were 11 people first on the team, and my responsibility was developing a grammar system for chatbots and figure out why certain conversations were dropped or were connected to, like a live person. Perhaps like chatbot was unable to identify, pick up certain pieces of conversation in order, to be routed to the correct automated solution on the back end. So that's a pretty much my spiel how I stepped into the field of data science.
It's interesting. Did you ever foresee yourself being where you are now? Did you think that you'd be focused on machine learning, data science, natural language processing, having come from that particular background?
Not at all. I was always a tech savvy. I think my journey with technology started when I was 9 years old. At that time, I lived in Ukraine, which I'm originally from, and then we didn't have all those robust PC computers, but we have USSR-made copycats, right? So, and I started programming in a programming language called Pascal, and I did a lot of things in Pascal, and then it's just a natural curiosity. I think that what led me, to this role that I'm having currently today.
That's awesome. So it's kind of interesting if you're someone who's spent some time in a certain industry, or perhaps are looking for their first role within data science, that it's okay to be curious and try something different.
I would say it's a must to be curious.
Right. Okay.
Because otherwise you're going to have those blinders.
Yeah.
That you're all, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go to the left. I don't want to go to the right. But then, that's how you create a closed-mindedness of team members, which leads nowhere. This road leads nowhere. Everyone needs to be a vital piece of a very well-oiled machine called data science team. That's my perspective on a data science team.
Nice. So I guess one of the focuses of this conversation is to try and figure out then whether, if someone was looking for a new role, would a resume be enough? If they've seen a role that perhaps they're not quite well aligned to, but they feel that they've got a bunch of skills that could be really, really useful or really helpful for that particular project, but they didn't, I don't know, say it was 5 years in healthcare that you needed, but you didn't have that. What would your advice be to someone who's making an application, putting together their resume? Would that be enough to be recognized, or are there other things that someone can do during that application process?
Well, as the saying goes, never judge book by its cover, right? So, and the resume is just a cover. So you have to talk to that person. You have to understand. You have to put yourself in a candidate's shoes in order to understand if there is a fit on your end or not. And at the same way, you have to make them feel that they are important, even though they may not be a fit. So humility is the key, I guess, in the hiring process. That's my point. And I went through a lot of failures in terms of resume, in terms of interview process, and you may know.
Yeah.
Which was funny, but I was never offended because the people who I spoke to will never got me down. I always felt important in their eyes, and I think that's the key to being a successful hiring manager.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. So a question I get asked a lot is what are you actually looking for when you're hiring? When someone sends you a resume, what is it specifically that you're looking for on that resume?
So in my understanding, you have to look at your team as the product and building out a team as the similar way as building out the product. So on one hand, you have your customer needs, and in a case of a data science team, your customer, those are internal teams, internal departments within the company that you're going to work with, or that individual is going to work with. And you always have to make sure that there is a need and you can feel that need. If you are not capable to fit, the requirements into those new framework, like the team will never work. Team will be dysfunctional, and there is nothing worse than the dysfunctional team. So always approach a hiring decision from the product management and development point of view.
Sure. So how can a candidate know what you're looking for in terms of the structure of your team? Like how would someone that was actually applying?
So it has to come out in a form of discussion. When you put your job description out, you want to keep as least details as possible, because we all know, especially nowadays at the pandemic times, it's not easy to assess the emotional level of the candidate or how they feel with people. Maybe they rub their fingers, maybe they bite their lips and things like that. Maybe they have a trembling voice when they talk in person. It all matters, because at some point that individual will have to present their work. And this is what I do as a hiring manager. I let everyone speak about what they did, because I don't want to, focus on myself. I want to have a focus on my team. I want to have a focus on an individual member of my team, because everyone is important. If someone, God forbid, gets hit by a bus and dies, my team will become dysfunctional.
Yeah, interesting. So what would your advice be to someone that was thinking, okay, cool, well, at some point I'm going to have to present my work? How do you practice that? Or do you practice it? Or is it something you do on the job?
So one of the key aspects when you interview and when you're assessing skills of a potential candidate is giving them a sample of your data, the real project that you work on, or the real project in the pipeline, and you want to see how they do with the data. And then the requirement is not only to provide a code base, but also to present the results. It could be a minute, it could be 2-3 slides. But what you want to hear the objective. You want to make sure that the candidate understands what is needed, and you want to see how well it's going to be presented in a human readable language. So, people are always try to throw in complicated, complex idea, different jargon terms, but it doesn't matter, because usually when the project gets presented, it presents it to people who are not tech savvy, and it may be intimidating for them when they are seen in the light that they don't understand what is happening. So it's always better to present in somewhat understandable format. So let's say, if we have a logistic regression, why not to frame it as a regression, as opposed to explaining what the softmax function is to someone who may not understand this.
Right. Yeah, I like that. So let's say someone did present a code base of some sort during the interview process, and it didn't completely align with the mission or the request that you asked of them, but they did understand from end to end what they provided, how they got there, the results they found, so they understood the process. Is that as important? Like understanding that process? Like, would you still consider someone if they didn't reach the end goal that you were trying to get them to, but they really understood the process of getting there? Would that be as valuable?
It will be valuable, because anything come out during the discussion. So during the presentation, you may play along, like, hey, I don't quite get this. Do you mind explaining, in more details, or maybe elaborate more? And then you'll see how the individual behaves.
Yeah. So actually, when they come in, when they have those first few conversations, their first impressions are key. But going back to the resume, then it's very difficult to judge a book by cover, as you said. But when you actually see a resume in front of you, what are you looking for immediately? Because that's a question that I ask myself. What is a hiring manager doing when they see a resume? Are they looking at the summary? Do they read it from top to bottom? Are they looking for certain keywords? Are they trying to look for experience in certain businesses? Like, what would you look for? I guess it depends on the role, but
it's funny you mentioned that. But what catches my eye is the structure of the resume, and you can pick up right away if the person values more the experience as opposed to education. So it's all based on the sections, and you can clearly see who is, who has more academia background and maybe valuable in terms of deep research or ongoing research or long-term research, as opposed to someone who can get job done as fast as possible in order to come up with MVT or POC or whatever it is.
Sure. So would your advice be make sure that you're concise with, you say I'm working at IPsoft and these are the responsibilities that I had. So you talk about what you did on the projects, the things that you think would add value. Is that the important stuff? Or are you saying list all of the businesses, list all of your publications, list a summary about yourself?
In my opinion, experience in especially use cases are much more valuable than the actual explanation of the work, or maybe like bullet points of technical skills that an individual may possess. So it will always good to look from the use case perspective. If someone is able and capable to explain what they did to the company and like what was the added value as the result of their work, it's always a good point.
Yeah. What if someone doesn't have experience? Like, what if they haven't had the chance to come out and get 5 years of experience under the belt? Let's just say if we were talking to new graduates that have just finished their PhDs, their masters, their bachelors, whatever it might be, and don't have that ability to show use cases from a professional setting. What would you be looking for on an entry-level resume?
Actually, if it's a master thesis, I would be looking at the topic or subject of the master thesis, and PhD by itself reassures you that, the PhD holder is capable of doing thorough and long-term ongoing research. It's a valuable skill, especially nowadays when we have, like the myriads of different algorithms, systems, everyone is trying to come up with their own version of very well-established concepts. So it's very important to have someone with PhD level in order to be able to do a thorough research. And especially when we talk about your example of radiology, right? Like cancer research, that may be extremely valuable as opposed to when we talk about some, like internet privacy product that simply crunches the data and tries to identify certain trends within the population. So those are two different boats.
Okay. Yeah. So just again, giving good examples. I touched on some of the other conversations that I've had with some of the other thought leaders and some of the ones that were coming up actually about spending time researching the type of businesses that you want to approach based on your schooling, your education, and really choosing your first business carefully, because that can really set the trajectory for the rest of your career.
Correct.
And yeah, so, okay. What I'd really like to know then is like, what are the turn-offs and turn-ons when you have someone apply for a role? Like,
what do you mean? Sorry.
So if someone applied and you were talking to them, and I don't know, let's just say they hadn't worked with the technology, or let's just say they hadn't worked with customers, or let's just say they wasn't as good at presenting some of the code base that they have, those might be turn-offs for you. But are there things that are obvious when a candidate's going through an application process that you would like give some advice around avoiding?
I would say the first contact, and preferably in person or maybe via video conferencing tools, are most important in order to assess how individual culturally fits the team. And a fine example I can throw up that happened not so long time ago. We were screening one candidate, and that individual forgot to remove the glasses, and he was silently typing questions that I asked him, and I zoomed in to the Zoom, and I could see
what you're doing.
The reflection of the screen in the glass.
Damn. Needless to say, that gentleman perhaps didn't make it to the next stage.
Not at all, because like honestly, like if this happens at the very first stage of our relationships, you never know what can come out later on. You have to be honest. It's not your own business. Even though it's your own business, you don't want to lose trust. Trust is the most important. Otherwise, you'll find yourself in a situation when every single number will be questioned, perhaps by people who have no credibility to question those numbers. But you paved the way. You paved this way, and you have no escape from this.
Yeah, transparency is key. On the recruitment side as well, I can say that goes for and again, we've worked with each other both on a candidate and a hiring manager perspective. Like, we've always been completely transparent with what do you need? Is it realistic?
Yes.
What are you looking for? Is it realistic? If you've got other things going on, just be transparent about them. If you don't know something, don't try and wing it. There's value in you saying, I'm not an expert in this, but this is how I might approach it. I've seen so many times people that are in the process that do try and wing a question. And then the hiring manager said to me, like, they didn't know what they was doing and they actually made it worse for themselves. Whereas if they'd have turned around and said, actually, look, that's just not something that's my strength, but I'm willing to learn. And this is how I would go about learning that. There's way more value in that.
Right. The willingness to learn and the eagerness to learn is the key as well. Like many companies, they introduce Learning Fridays. When you have half of the Friday, team works on a project. And it's not necessarily business related. It could be a Kaggle competition, which gives you that, like a team spirit. We work on something else outside of our work responsibilities, and we want to make sure that we work as a team as efficiently as possible, and perhaps winning the prize of 50K or something, right? So
Definitely. So I think to kind of summarize, it says to me that if you are looking for a role within data science, just going out there and making applications on Indeed or on LinkedIn isn't enough.
It's not enough. Not at all. Not at all.
So your advice is to think about how you're trying to present yourself when you're in the process, beyond just trying to show them what you can do. Be thinking about how you could fit in culturally.
Culture is very important, right?
Being transparent with what you can and can't do.
Yep.
And honest.
Absolutely.
And I think just generally, it's important, and I touched on this again in one of my other podcasts, to just be present, to engage with people, even when you're not actively looking, to just be in touch with people, know what the market's doing, stay on top of your game, and be prepared for anything that might happen, right? Pandemic being a very obvious situation that no one was prepared for. So just make sure that you're always practicing these things, right? Because you never know what can happen.
Of course, absolutely. Networking is very important. No matter what, either you're looking for a job, or either you're looking for new opportunities, either you're looking for new business connections. Networking is the key, especially nowadays when everyone is caught up with digital technologies. There is no substitution for in-person, like communication.
Yeah. How are you, out of interest, it goes on to another topic, but how are you going to manage remote hiring in the future? Do you think it will be simple, easy? Do you think that it's going to be harder than having people coming in person and you having that opportunity to actually meet them and figure out who they are?
My number one requirement always is have video on. You must have video on, even before the pandemic times. And the reason for that, throughout decades, us human beings, we wanted to be able to see each other even though we are remote. And now when we have this opportunity under our fingertips, we intentionally turn off the video. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah,
that's actually quite an important thing to mention, to get comfortable on video.
Of course.
Because now you are, if you're looking for a new job, going to be on video.
All the time. All the time.
And I don't know why it makes, I'm starting to get a little bit more comfortable with it as, the more of these that I do, but it's not an easy thing to do.
You have to get used to this, yes. And like within my team prior to the pandemic, we tested out the video, video communication, I think within 2 weeks, and we got comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And now I cannot even imagine having no visual contact during our meetings. It's a must.
I think it would probably be weird going back into an office and being like, what? You're in person right now? This is weird.
Yeah. And even when you're in the office, you kind of remote anyway. All your communication happens either Slack or Teams or any other IM tool. And then oftentimes meetings, you take meeting from your desk using WebEx, using Zoom, using anything else, but you're still remote even though you're present in the office.
Yeah, exactly. We decided actually to go fully remote recently, and honestly, it's been for us quite productive, more productive I guess there's just, you have to be a little bit more assertive to like people's mental health and how they're figuring it out and how they're finding it. But generally speaking, it's been a really good experience. I really would find it strange going back to an office now, personally.
Yeah, and especially when you have people in risk group around you. So that's a big no-go. I agree.
Well, look, Kip, I really appreciate your insights. I think there's a couple of really good nuggets of information that people can take away from this. And overall, a resume, as we've kind of concluded, it just isn't enough, especially, by the way, when you've got now, God knows how many more people who have been laid off and now looking for work. So this is the most important time to do more than just hit apply. If you have any questions, let me just double check. I haven't seen any come up so far. No, not yet. But if you do have any questions for myself or Kip, we're more than happy to answer anything beyond this particular podcast. The recording for this as well is going to go up on YouTube, so we'll share that a little bit later on. But yeah, it's been great speaking, Kip. I'm sure we'll speak again. And if we come up with a new topic in the meantime, you'll see us both live here on LinkedIn again.
The pleasure was all mine, Lewis. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Speak soon.
Yep. Talk soon. Bye-bye.